Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of That's Wild with Tegan. Today I'm joined by someone who is making serious waves in the world of disability advocacy, fashion and social media. Eliza is a disabled content creator, speaker and educator who is passionate about accessibility, LGBTQ plus inclusion and breaking down barriers in the fashion industry. With a background in graphic design, they are now using their platform to challenge outdated narratives, highlight adaptive fashion, and push for real change, whether that's in brand campaigns, social events, or the digital space. From working with major brands to hosting workshops that educate and inspire, Eliza is all about making the world a more inclusive space. Eliza, welcome to the podcast. Well, hi, thank you so much for coming on my podcast.
No worries at all. I'm excited.
So I've been following you on social media for a few years now, and I really loved how colourful your content is, and how just like kind of upfront it is. Very well, it shows exactly how disabled people we live and the struggle that we have to go through. And I wanted to talk a bit about that as well. So, what kind of got you into being a content creator?
Yeah, so I first started content creation in 2020. So when the pandemic started, I was put on furlough from my job. I'm sorry, it sounded like I was getting emotional then. I'm not. About 5 years. And yeah, I basically had the space to create, and I was working full time, but just was not coping with it at the time. Like it was not good. It was not a good mix. And then obviously when the pandemic started, I had space and time to create, and that was kind of when my health was. So I'd already been struggling a lot with my health before I went into full-time work, but it became really prevalent when I was working full-time, kind of how disabling it was, I think, because before then I was at uni, or I was kind of like working 1 or 2 days a week to kind of get by because I was in school or whatever. And then when I actually kind of got like a job, which I had to travel into work every day and then sit at a desk all day and then get home, it became really obvious to me how much I was struggling. So I started creating online. I didn't necessarily think like this is going to be my job, but it kind of just started that way. I guess it wasn't a definite, it's not going to be my job, but it wasn't, that kind of wasn't the plan, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then it kind of all picked up. And from there, I've now been doing it for 5 years. And it's my job now. So it's the way I make my money. And yeah, which is really exciting.
That's really cool. And I do think it's quite a fun job to have, I think, to be able to create and do things that you want to do, I guess. Uh, so your job before, were you a graphic designer? Was that right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I worked in graphic design for a year. And I did a degree in graphic design, which yeah, I really loved. And I kind of do feel like I've taken a lot of elements from that into my work now.
Yeah.
But yeah, just I don't know. I feel like uni graphic design and real life graphic design was very different. Um,
Yeah, I agree. I think when you're doing a degree, you learn a lot of different things than what you actually need in like the real life.
yeah, it was a bit of a shock, I think, coming into the design world. And yeah, I mean, It was like it was still fun. And there are times even now that like work that I created, and like I'll go out and see it out and about and be like, I designed that. And that's still quite weird. And kind of exciting, I guess. Maybe that wears off if you do it for longer, but for me, I'm like, oh yeah, I did that branding. But it just wasn't, my day-to-day was not enjoyable. It was just painful. Physically and just emotion, like everything was just not working, basically. So yeah.
Well, to kind of go a bit more on that, because I graduated last year, so this is my first year within like the world of work full time,
Mhm.
and I think as a disabled person, nothing really prepares you for that transition.
Yeah.
Um, what would you say your experience was like, or what would you want other people to know about?
Yeah, so I think I grew up and I always knew I was disabled, I guess. So like I'm dyslexic and I got support for that. And I kind of always was in and out of school to go to hospital and things like that. And I kind of noticed that other kids weren't doing that. But my disability was, I guess, invisible or actually just undiagnosed at the time. Because now looking back at it, it makes sense to what was going on. So I knew all of that, but I still did school with support and like obviously I did university. And the same thing at university, I was quite unwell at uni, but because it was uni, I could kind of manage it. I was only doing a couple of hours a day in uni. And I did work hard, but it still was nowhere near the same level as working in an office. And also like my uni was near my house and I didn't have to like get on any public transport or any of that. And then when I started working full time, having to kind of get up and get into the office for 9 o'clock and then stay there till 6 and then get the train home. I yeah, I just wasn't prepared for the physical toll that would take on my body doing that kind of every day and then just having weekends off. And I just remember like I would just sleep the whole weekend, just to like try and recover. And then I used to like sit up and be like, oh my goodness, it's like Monday tomorrow. How did that happen? I don't feel any better or rested or anything. Um, and I also found like although my workplace would say that they were supportive, I'm not really sure they actually were. So like I have a lot of hospital appointments. Um, and then I'd be in the hospital doing the appointment with a meeting on my phone, or I'd have to like make the time up. So like I'd go to a hospital appointment, then I'd be staying at work until 8 to like make up the time that I'd had off for the hospital appointment. And because I was having so many, it was not, yeah, the easiest thing to navigate. And obviously this was before the pandemic started. So it was before working from home was a thing and nobody worked from home. Like now that kind of feels a bit ridiculous because you'd probably just work from home if you had a hospital appointment or whatever, but that wasn't a thing at the time. And I remember I did make the workplace very aware that I was disabled and I used to like strap hot water bottles to my body to try and relieve pain. But I just think you remember having a conversation with somebody who told me that I wasn't proper disabled because at the time I wasn't using any mobility aids. Um,
That's
and
easy.
yeah, literally they were like, oh, yeah, but you're not proper disabled, are you? Because like, you're not using any mobility aids. And actually, I think I was probably worse then than I am now because now I've learned about pacing and I use the right aids. And as a result, I'm able to do more without kind of hitting that threshold, which um, is, yeah, when you hit that, when I hit it, it's really hard to come back. And particularly like when you're working full time and you kind of at your limit and then you're having to do it again the next day. And then that's just getting kind of pushed and pushed. And it got to a point where, yeah, I just did not feel mentally or physically safe, kind of continuing to do it. And like, it just felt like everything was kind of falling apart. And I just didn't really feel like I was supported, even though I was very vocal about the disabilities that I knew that I had and what was kind of going on, but they just didn't really, didn't, maybe they wanted to be supportive, but didn't know how to support me in the right way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of companies and brands they aim to be accessible, but that might not be inclusive.
Yeah.
And I think they struggle with the difference between the two. But yeah, I agree with you totally. It's hard to kind of find that sweet spot of being able to work and not crash out every day because you're
Yeah.
exhausted.
Yeah. It is just like, it's not impossible because I feel very lucky to and privileged to do the job that I do now. And obviously I'm my own boss, and that gives me the freedom and flexibility, although I am sometimes a bit too harsh on myself. But that's okay because it's me that's doing it, not someone else. um, and I think that's another added layer to it, right? Like, for me, if I'm not well enough to work on a day, or I have to take a week off, or like I've got um, a surgery coming up where I need to take a month off, all of those things naturally are just stressful because I've got work to do, and that's just stressful. But there isn't that added level of I've got to tell somebody this and navigate their reaction. And like I remember all of that when I was working being really hard and felt really heavy. And there were just times where I'd be working and I just shouldn't have been at work. But it was
Mm.
so scary calling in sick that, I'd kind of avoid it. And I think a lot of people feel that way because it's just you're dealing with somebody else and they might not understand disability, and you're expected to be the same as everyone else and only have 5 days off a year or whatever it is for sickness. And it's just, yeah. And that added pressure of having to like please somebody else felt really, and maybe other people don't feel it as intensely as I do, but I felt it really really intensely,
Yeah.
and the guilt of letting down in like other people and all of that, and all of it's like nonsense, like it shouldn't matter, and I logically know that, but it was still like the way that I felt in the workplace, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get that. I'm in my first kind of half a year of being in um but having a job full time.
Mhm.
And it is like, although I want to do the job and be good at it, it's hard to manage the lifestyle and also like communicate my needs. And but I mean, I'm very lucky that my boss knows me and she's very accommodating and I can work from home, which is nice. But I think if I had a job anywhere else, it would be a lot more scary to like voice what I actually need.
Yeah.
But I guess that kind of goes on to accessibility, and I know in your social media stuff you do a lot on accessibility with travel and workplace and just general life, really. Um, what would you say the response is on social media to you challenging the accessibility needs that aren't being met?
Yeah, it's varied. Sometimes people are just like kind of shocked about it, I think.
Mm.
And I get that because I've not been a wheelchair user my whole life. So I would say I've been a wheelchair user for like 4.5 years now. So before that, I just was not aware of like what access was. Obviously, I knew that I was disabled, but I was kind of struggling through without like really anything to help. Um, so I guess it just didn't come into my brain. And I think that's like the main thing that people experience. Like they're not actively horrible people that doing things to deliberately leave disabled people out. But it's just like it just isn't, they're not registering it because they don't see it or need to see it, and they don't need to experience that, so they're not they're not seeing it, and they're also not taught about it, and then so it's just not registering with them. So I think a lot of people are kind of shocked when I talk about it more than anything. um you always get like the odd group of people that are just horrible because that's what they're like online. Um, and then obviously other disabled people and like yeah, wheelchair users, people who use mobility aids, or anyone really that has a disability, generally seem to be like, yeah, this is how I experience. And sometimes I'll like do scenarios that have happened to me in my life, and people be like, yeah, there's no way this happened. And then all these disabled people reply being like, yeah, this probably did happen.
Yeah,
like it probably did actually happen. um and like, there's always horror stories, right? There, and I don't know, I feel like I get less of them now because I have like blonde hair, but when I had colourful hair, people were being particularly horrible. But that's like a whole other conversation for another day. And like intersectionality plays into it and all of those things. But yeah, you do always get like the odd rude person when you're out and about, and it's
yeah.
not a fun time. But most of the time, people are just shocked.
It's crazy because I think a lot of people just aren't educated on disabled people as a whole,
Yeah,
and they don't quite understand it. So I think for me, it's usually out of a place of curiosity rather than judgment, but they didn't know how to actually voice it in a curious way.
yeah,
But I agree with you. I've had some wild stories, and I don't always use my wheelchair, but it's usually when I am in my wheelchair when those things start to happen more.
yeah,
Or if I'm driving, people don't believe that I can drive, and then suddenly they see me drive, and then I'm an inspiration because I can't drive.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's
It,
like it's
it's
a
interesting.
bet.
Like the difference, because obviously I've kind of experienced both using mobility aids and not using mobility aids. And like you definitely, at least I definitely did like experience discrimination between the two, but the discrimination was different. And I kind of found like with when I was not using mobility aids, people's discrimination was a bit more subtle, whereas when I'm in my wheelchair, they're just like straight out with it.
Yeah, people
So
get crazy, honestly. They come up with
yeah,
these
it
things.
is weird. I don't know. I don't know if it's just where I live or like and if I'm just unlucky. I'm not sure. But sometimes people are just horrible. Like and you're just like, what? Like what was that for? And I think we're kind of sometimes expected to sort of brush it off and get on with it a bit, but it's yeah, it does kind of impact you. Most people are lovely. Like I don't want it to be like, oh my God, everyone's awful, but
Yeah.
uh, you do just have like, yeah, I don't know, the odd weird experience. It probably happens to me a couple of times a month. And then yeah, it's always, I don't know.
Well, going into my next set of questions, I want to talk about um your your fashion content,
Mhm.
and I've been looking through your content and it's very colourful and out there, and that's what I love because I tend to wear very basic clothes. But I'm trying to update my fashion a little bit.
Hey, yeah, yeah, nice.
Um, but I saw that you recently did, well, you tried on the new line at Primark and their accessible range. Um, like how much of an impact do you think it would be if there were more ranges like this across different companies in the fashion industry?
Yeah, I think it would be amazing, to be honest. Like I think what Primark's done is a great start. But I think having more options in multiple areas at multiple price points just offers more freedom to disabled shoppers. And yeah, I was kind of surprised at how much I was reaching for the accessible clothing and like there are ways that it helps that I wouldn't have even thought of. Like, I don't know, getting a blood test done or something. You can just undo your jacket without having to take it off, all of those things. Um, and I think there's often this idea that disabled people don't care about fashion or clothes and like, or maybe we don't even get a choice in what we wear, all of these like things. Whereas I think a lot of the time it might seem that we're not caring about fashion, but that's because fashion just isn't accessible. And like stores aren't accessible. Like I it's not, for me, it's not just about like just accessible clothing. Like that's a great start, but also things like making charity shops more accessible and secondhand shops. Like I used to love going into like vintage markets and vintage shops and like going through every single rack and trying to find um, something that was like £5 that I can wear. I've got a dress that I got when I was 16 and I still wear it to this day. And it was like £5 from this vintage shop. It's just one of those things that just fits perfectly and I
Mm.
love it. And I don't really get to do that anymore because so often they're just not accessible. They're like really crammed and I can't get in. And it's just like that was something that I really loved doing. Whereas I don't really have that now apart from online, but then I do find like online secondhand shopping. I don't really like doing it because obviously I sit down most of the time and then if I buy something and it doesn't sit right or whatever, you can't send it back. And then there's loads of energy and then having to like get rid of the piece that you bought. And it just becomes, I just find that really inaccessible. Whereas before I was going in shops and then I could try it on there and then and see.
Mm.
But now like so many places just aren't accessible. And so like I think having high street brands creating accessible clothing maybe will spur like smaller businesses to do the same thing or think about their accessibility. But I think it's really exciting. It's yeah, an amazing start. And I mean, there's always more to be done, right? But I think it's, you know, as for what they've done right now, like um the clothes look amazing and it's exciting to see disabled people in like a major high street brand as well.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. But it's the first time that I've seen really an inclusive like media campaign,
Yeah,
but also a range of clothing that anyone can wear at any
yeah.
age as well. If you could design one piece of clothing, what would be your signature look?
Good question. I love like a big, ridiculous dress. Um, but they're really hard to navigate, particularly like in a manual chair, but also in a power chair because I use a mix of the two. But in a power chair too, because like I just like look down and then suddenly it's dragging in the wheel or something. So I'd love to like make something that somehow avoids that. I saw Marissa Bodie wore like a gorgeous red dress for the Oscars, I think it was. Anyway, the Wicked crew are all doing every award season. It was one of them. I think it was the Oscars. And I just thought it looked amazing. Like it worked with the dress and it just was stunning. But I knew that it was going to be getting stuck in wheels because, you know, it was one of those events where form definitely came over function and fair enough.
Yeah,
But I'd love to be able to like design something like a big dress that somehow didn't get stuck in wheels. I don't know if that's possible, but maybe.
there must be a way. Like maybe we had some form of like cape that went behind
Yeah, maybe.
the road. I
There
don't.
will be a way.
Yeah, there must be
I'll get on it.
something. Yeah, I look forward to seeing it one day. A picture.
Yeah, it would just yeah, it'd be amazing. And then just every wheelchair user be in a big ridiculous dress all the time.
Yeah, that would be so fun. I mean, I think people should just start wearing like the most ridiculous clothes every day anyway.
Yeah,
Like, why wait for an event? Just wear the nice dress to work.
wear it all the time. Wear it to Sainsbury's. Why not?
Yeah, yeah, why not? Make use of it.
Spend so much money on them that like we may as well wear them all the time.
And to be honest, since lockdown, a lot of people don't get out to events as much.
Yeah,
You might as well wear your nice dress to the shops.
yeah, exactly. You know, then your local neighborhood can see it.
And so, one thing that you've also done before is collaborate with brands and companies to make content and graphic designing. Um, is there a way that you work with the companies to kind of align with your advocacy for inclusivity?
Yeah. So I've been really lucky to work with a few brands, both just like promoting their products and also directly with them. And if I'm working directly with a brand, which basically means that I'm just creating content that's going on their page and not on mine, Um, then obviously they already know that like I'm disabled. And as a result, I think brands that kind of align with that seem to kind of reach out to me or I reach out to them. Um, and so it's meant that I've been able to kind of reach a different audience that maybe wouldn't have seen my work. So I worked with couple of sexual health brands, Brooke and SH24, to basically talk about disability and sexual health, which is something that we don't see spoken about very often at all. And also just like not disability, but just sexual health, but seeing a disabled person talking about it kind of, I
Yeah.
think, feels exciting to me because so often, I think it's amazing having disabled people talking about disability, and we need more of it always. But I think also just having disabled people doing normal things that everyone else does is in itself kind of like important and activism, I guess. And that was one of the things that I really liked about it. And that I also did that. I worked with a company for about a year last year called Love in London, and they did tourist content, travel content for London, people coming to London, basically. And lots of people were really pleased to see like a wheelchair user creating this type of content. And it meant that we were able to talk about accessible travel and how to like come to London as a disabled person and what that looks like, and all the different places that you can take breaks and have quiet spaces, which is all information that you don't normally see in like a travel, page. A lot of the time, actually, when I see travel content, which I actually really like to consume, obviously not about London because I live here, but for
Yeah.
other areas, um, I really like to consume it. But most of the time when I'm watching it, I'm kind of thinking like, oh, there's no way I'd ever be able to actually do that because it's not accessible. So actually being able to show things that you can do felt, yeah, really important. And then I work with brands kind of on my own page as well. And I've been really lucky to work with various different brands where I'm talking about accessibility and like showing how a company is accessible or has an accessible shop or whatever it is. And that feels important to kind of highlight to people so that more disabled people can know about it and go and attend or support the company. And yeah.
Yeah, I was talking to someone the other day about how there's a difference between like disabled people making content for disabled people and then disabled people just making content.
Yeah.
And that that is probably one part of my, well, at least my experience that I've not seen loads of, just disabled people doing normal day-to-day things. And well, as you said, sexual health isn't really something that's spoken about in the disabled community or educated on. And well, at least when you do like sexual education in school and stuff, there's no knowledge or education around what it looks like to be in a relationship as a disabled
Yeah.
person. And that's something that I really want to like improve, because I think that there isn't really any information out there regarding what that looks like. And then
Yeah.
you're in it, you don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. I think it's really nice to start seeing disabled people just explaining day-to-day things and things that everyone do or does. And yeah, I'm really happy that you're kind of making this kind of content because it makes me happy when I see it. So
Yeah,
thank you.
I think it's I find it really exciting when I see, yeah, disabled people just talking about things that everyone else is doing. And um I think so often we don't see that, like when we see disabled people that are, I don't know, brought onto a TV show or something, a lot of the time it's for them to talk about disability, which makes sense. And like I'm happy to do that. That's,
Yeah,
it doesn't bother me. But not every disabled person wants to talk about disability all the time. Some of us do, because like, I mean, it is also all consuming and like impacts every second of your day. But not everybody does. And like, nobody should be assumed that just because they're a wheelchair user or just because they're disabled and, whatever that looks like for the person, that they must talk about that, because actually they might just want to talk about what they're wearing, like,
yeah,
and that's fine, or what their job is, or their favorite hobby or, you know, whatever it is. And yeah, we definitely shouldn't just be expected to have to talk about disability just because we're disabled. And I do say that, like, I talk about that a lot in my work, how like it's not okay to ask a disabled person what happened or randomly go up to people and expect education, because not all of us want to do that. Some of us just want to go about our day and not have to educate random people.
Yeah, I mean, it's also not our responsibility to have to
Yeah.
educate everyone all the time. They can easily ask questions online or
Yeah.
go
There's people doing it for free
to
online. You
yeah,
know.
yeah, they know the way to answer your questions. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Google. You
Um,
couldn't. I'll answer your question if you pay me 20 quid.
do you know what? That should be a thing though. That
Yeah.
well, with the car reader, and be like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
first not answering a question.
Yeah. 20 quid to go, please.
Yeah. Um, so my podcast is called That's Wild with Tegan, and I kind of wanted to share wild and funny stories. So I was wondering, do you have any wild stories that you'd be willing to share?
Oh, I had one a couple of weeks ago where I was at the theatre and I transferred out of my chair. I did actually make a post about this, but I transferred out of my chair. Um, and they kind of came in right before the show started and were grumpy that I wasn't standing up because I wasn't in a position to be able to do it on the day. Um, but in the process, £10 dropped out of their pocket. So me and my partner like shoved it under our chair and then took it as an ableist tax and then bought chips on the way home. So yeah,
That's
there
the
you
damn thing.
go. Yeah,
That's that. Even this time.
yeah, yeah. I mean, if they'd been nice, we would have given it back, but I think they deserve to pay for our chips.
Yeah, they did. 100%. That's such a good thing. I'm actually gonna use that now.
So yeah, that was probably one of the best things that could have come out of that situation at least.
Yeah, a good set of chips always makes the night
Yeah.
on a good note. Uh,
Sure.
to finish that, just do you have any upcoming projects or anything that you want to share or where everyone can follow you?
Yeah, so I don't really have any upcoming projects because I'm about to be off for a bit of time to recover from surgery. But there will be stuff after that. But you can follow me at Disabled Eliza across all the social medias, even Snapchat now. So there we go. And yeah, I'll be posting updates for anything that's coming up. And you can see all my regular content over there and all the ridiculous things that happen to me in my life.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and for chatting with me.
No
And,
worries. Thank you so much for having me.
and yeah, I look forward to seeing all your content and what you get up to and everything.
Same for you. I'm always like looking at your stuff that you're posting and yeah,
Well,
just in
thank you.
comments and stuff.
Thank